About 2.5 weeks ago, I go to the dermatologist. I have a bump inside my nose. He cuts it out and he cauterizes it, right? And anyway, that's one fact you need to know. The other fact you need to know is I lavage my nasal cavity twice a day just for allergies. I'm an idiot. I didn't stop doing that. And so about a week later, I had obviously gotten rid of all the scabbing, etc. And my nose is gushing, bleeding, and will not stop. Like blood is everywhere, all over the house. I'm holding toilet paper, leaning back, can't do it. So I go to the emergency room and I'm expecting them to cauterize my nose again. And I've learned my lesson. I won't lavage. I won't blow my nose for a while. Swear to God, they put a 10-foot tampon up my nostril. Ooh. Literally touched my brain.
Ooh.
And so they shove it up there. And I'm like, we're not cauterizing. They go, no. We do this and you go see your ENT the next day. And I'm like, okay. So I call my ENT. My ENT, who is now, I think, the most sadistic person on the planet, says, no. You don't come see me today. You come see me in 48 hours. We need it to heal. So 72 hours, I have a large tampon in my nose. And yes, to answer the question that both of y'all are thinking and that my buddy Fish asked, it had a little string hanging from it. So I did that for 72 hours. And then I went and he removes it, but then I can't lavage or blow my nose for 10 days. And I'm on day 7 of that. So it now feels like I have a cement block in my left nostril because I'm not allowed to pick my nose or do anything. So
what a story.
That's my last 2 weeks. How are you guys?
Did you sell any software with that thing up your nose?
I did not. I was strangely absent from Zoom meetings.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, Chuck. That's crazy.
Thank you.
Don't do this.
Yes, there you go. Anytime you have something in your nose, don't touch it for 10 days. Let it heal because the ramifications are not great.
Well, Shel Silverstein wrote a poem about that, I think.
Probably so. All right, Mark, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, it's kind of hello darkness, my old friend with oil. I know how much you love talking about oil at the kickoff every week. At least it's not the IEA.
Thank God.
Which may or may not come up. We're in the midst of a number of crosswinds, competing factors. I think Javier Blas has written, and Arjun called him out, about a cartoonishly large glut. And then you have things like, Indian demand up 7% year over year. U.S. shale or U.S. production in general looks like for the year 2025 has been adjusted slightly upward by, I think, about 110,000 barrels a day to just around 13.55 for the year.
So as she said, Chuck, you were just a little early, I think.
And then the Saudis didn't raise their official selling price to Asia. And then, of course, you had the somewhat hopeful glass half full increase for November from OPEC Plus of 137,000 barrels a day. Yet, crude maintains a 6 handle. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm going to go with the fact that markets don't lie, people do. So the price holding at 60 tells you demand isn't dead, no matter what the talking heads say. I mean, that's sort of the cutting through. That's my read. So, it's interesting. Is that what say you, Chuck?
I always found in my career that we were really good knowing supply and demand and where we were kind of 6 to 9 months in the rear view mirror. But always in the moment, we were always a little hazy. And so I think your big question is truly what are the economic measures of the United States, right? I mean, we're getting goofy data out of there. The Fed has definitely held interest rates higher than I think if it hadn't been Donald Trump as president, we potentially would have seen. So I don't know what to make of it, but I think your point's right. What is a barrel of oil worth? Go look on the NYMEX, 64.32 or whatever it is. Boom. That's what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of, playful jabs, I guess, back and forth. I did see someone, I wish I'd have grabbed it, and unfortunately it's not easily searchable on X, but there is I think there's an extreme $500 a barrel call being made on the basis of what this analyst believes is shaping up along the fundamentals. But 500 is kind of brought me back to the days I used to work for Matt Simmons, and we got a lot of damage to absorb if we head in that direction. But they're just such a disparity, because it seems this growing chorus of big supply gut, a lot of oil on the water and building. China's continuing to restock as they should, if they believe we're in a physically tighter market. But at the same time, we sit here kind of muddling along, and quite frankly, it's a bit boring at this point. I wanted to ask you, Chuck, OPEC surprising with a not as big increase, 137,000 barrels a day increase for November. I think it was fairly well telegraphed that they were going to come in more conservatively. What does that do to your OPEC/Saudi thesis?
Well, actually, I think we have to kind of bifurcate it now. I think it's Saudi and the others. Saudi may actually have their excess capacity. Who knows? For years, I was kind of like, they just don't have it, guys. They can do it for 90 days. That's about it. Maybe they do have more than that, because they've been running, kind of, I'm going to say on slow or relatively slow the last few years. So maybe they do have more excess capacity. I'll go from neutral I'll go from negative to neutral on that. But I will say this: it doesn't look like the rest of OPEC really has the ability to meet their demand, meet their allocations. If you look kind of across the board, people have been underproducing here for a while.
Yeah, I think the Saudis are, not. It's a 1 month data point on what they decided to do in terms of leaving the official selling price alone. Maybe a little heightened awareness of demand fragility that we don't see or hasn't shown up, in 5-handle crude. At the same time, I did see something, and I think it was a sovereign loan as opposed to a bond issuance by the Saudis on the order of $10 billion. So I think we're kind of approaching that point where they need to see higher pricing. It's just going to be interesting to see where this all goes in the near term for the remainder of the year, and where activity goes, economic activity and industry activity, which shows no signs of doing anything. But
I'll go to
staying
Kirk
very
real
conservatively
quick.
Postured.
I'll go to Kirk first on this, and Mark, you can answer it too. Does the potential Donald Trump 20-point plan for Gaza peace play anywhere into this? I mean, are the Saudis going to play nice to try to get that deal through and then potentially play hardball? Does it have anything to do with it, or is it unrelated? I don't know that I have an opinion.
I haven't connected those two things. Go ahead, Kirk.
Let's talk about what yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of one of the most horrific killing sprees. I don't think there's nothing that seems on the horizon that, really the bigger issue would be if Trump tried to blow up the whole thing, no pun intended, and an all-out war would happen. But in this case, we're talking about a president that's saying I can maybe solve. Going back to potential peace doesn't change a whole lot. Maybe the oil markets open up, but I don't see necessarily Trump's plan. In fact, you can correct me here. He's not holding anyone accountable like the Qataris or someone else. So that to me, what would be more interesting is us trying to figure out, as we're looking at sort of OPEC, and OPEC trying to micromanage output's a fool's errand when the markets are naturally schizophrenic. But what are they trying to actually communicate in their forecast and actually what they're doing? That to me is the bigger question, is what is OPEC actually trying to forecast? Because ultimately, forecasting is trying to tell the market what we want to see, because we know the market's going to act as what the market does. But in terms of how this impacts, how Gaza impacts it, I think it would, the Gaza with Trump's plan actually reduces tension versus make oil markets more erratic. I think it actually smooths out the curve, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think there's a big shrug because it is so complicated and these things get protracted. The latest update I saw was probably a couple of days ago, was that Hamas had agreed to some things, not all. 20 is a lot. And so is there an out here for, well, we didn't get full satisfaction on a capitulation? You know, Trump's trying to push a quick resolution, particularly the remaining hostages. And that's as we head deeper into the year and heading into midterm year. You know, can he score another point of getting a major conflict resolved? So I don't think there's an immediate kind of translation, a headline risk that everything falls out of bed because the tensions have magically disappeared because they've got this peace plan in place. And just from a fundamental standpoint, it doesn't really move the needle, right? In terms of,
it does feel like the Saudis are owed something, and I hate to say it in such a way that I'm justifying. I'm just saying if you're looking at cutting a deal right here, hey, we need you to, in effect, back Israel on this, or at least be okay with it. And then number two, I need low oil prices going into my midterms. You know, kind of interesting of, okay, Saudi, what do you get what do you get out of it? And maybe it's higher oil prices in 28, 29, something like that. I don't know. There seems to be kind of something there. Or although maybe Saudi, just to have the bombs going off in Israel and the Palestinian issue over, maybe that's good enough. You know, I think there could be a lot of deal fatigue around that, you know, for the whole Arab world.
Next story. What are we on? What's next?
Well, it's somewhat related. And if you're thinking that, you know, we're imminent to peak oil, then I don't think you'd be playing aggressively in a bid for a Canadian oil sands producer, MEG Energy, which Cenovus just up their bid in response to Strathcona coming in with a competing bid. And, you know, Cenovus has got 880,000 barrels a day of current production, over 600,000 of that is oil sands. So I think this bodes well, unless you think they're behaving totally irrationally, that, you know, we're going to see a lot of demand for both consolidation and volumes to maybe backstop some of the heavier stuff that U.S. refiners are finding harder and harder to get.
You know, it kind of ties back to the old story, but the $500 oil call, She Drills, Christine Guerrero said, we'll never hit 500 because way before then, the United States will just invade Venezuela and start pumping all their heavy crude, given that we need it. And she's probably right about that.
So are you saying that the refineries that Canadian, this heavy oil sands is actually good for our refining?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take that as a yes. So that
want
means
more of it.
That means the price of oil sands, which is going to be naturally higher because it's more like mining than it is drilling, correct? it's more expensive. That's an interesting because it tells you that Synovus, at least in their modeling, is saying that, they're following market incentives, not political narratives, ultimately, is what they're trying to do. I'm actually very curious. This is going to be a fun one to watch throughout the next year to see if their estimations, because I wonder what the cost to pull this stuff out of the ground really is. And clearly they're thinking that the price that they can sell their oil is going to be higher than that. I want to follow that math, and we should probably pull that together to see if we think the estimates are actually there. But go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I was going to say, and I'll give credit where credit's due. I went on Grok and I said, give me a hot take on the MEG Synovus deal. And it said Synovus's last minute sweetener on the MEG deal, bumping the cash option to $29.50 and tilting towards a 50-50 cash stock split, isn't a bold master stroke. It's a panic band-aid on a bid that's already screaming overpay in a world where oil sands hype is cooling faster than a SAG-D steam chamber without the heat. Sure, it juices Christina Lake synergies to $400 million a year by 2028, but folding into MEG into Synovus just creates another bloated Canadian oil giant chasing volumes in a market that's pivoting hard to EVs and carbon taxes. Shareholders cashing out now might dodge the real write-down when WTI dips below 60 again. And then it goes, Strathcona is still lurking with its illiquid shares like a bad ex who won't sign the papers. But honestly, MEG's board's picking the devil they know feels like choosing a leaky lifeboat over jumping ship entirely. Wow.
Well, there you have it.
Unbelievable.
Welcome to BDE, Grok.
Was that AGI?
That's progressive, though, Chuck, because the world's not going to EVs and renewables. I mean, let's just.
I think it was implying Canada's doing that, not the world. That
but
Canada's
almost
doing that.
I mean, Norway did it, and they still use 19 barrels per capita.
Yeah, per person per day. Yeah. I don't know. We need to watch oil prices to see if. To me, I've always, who likes oil sands because the price is higher, but. Maybe they know something we don't. I think Grok might be onto something, but it's not. I'm more, let's look at executive incentives to do the deal. Maybe there's something in that. And Synovus is a Canadian energy company. What else are they going to do?
That's very true. So why don't we roll from that into renewables? I mean, did we way overplay the death of renewables already?
Well, I think there are two frames of reference here. One is confined to the U.S. within the political framework of particularly, offshore wind taking it on the chin and a early rollback of some of the incentives. But, we're still spending a lot globally on renewables. It was first half of this year, $386 billion. And right before I jumped on, I saw, and I'll mention the name, IEA, its executive director posted a long piece about what's going on globally with renewables in every subcategory, from onshore and offshore wind to solar to battery storage. Everything is up substantially. But in the case of offshore wind, he did reference, a bit of concern and alarm in that, there's some policy headwinds, but more importantly, there are economic headwinds and supply chain related issues, not to mention the stuff that we've been talking about. Again, it's very biased to what we hear and see on offshore wind here in the U.S. But the fact of the matter is we're still spending as a globe a ton of money on this stuff. And so are we just off by ourselves with the rhetoric, but we're still putting, capital that is increasingly challenged to make a competitive return relative to other things in energy that you could be doing? And how much of this capital should have gone over the last 5 years into actually delivering the electrons in terms of the grid, transmission, distribution?
I worked for one of the largest energy companies on the planet, and their management team and colleagues of mine were literally convinced of climate change, literally convinced that the world needs to go renewables, despite knowing like our wind team could never win deals because when a deal finally closed, they're like, there's no way to make money. I'm like, well then, but the management team and the company culture pushed, we got to do it. Now, YL came in and just cleaned house saying, well, we need to make money. But when the largest, when society, when children believe this, the planet's about to burn up, and management teams are pushing a narrative thinking, hey, maybe, because half of that 365 billion is probably subsidies. I mean, so you're trying to game a system and Elon's actually, of all people, has done a great job of leveraging government subsidies. I mean, Tesla and SpaceX are all built on government subsidies. But the reality is there's a lot of people that you'd call smart that are making really, really dumb decisions. So let's not to me, I sat there going, you guys, we need to go into exploration. We need to, be better at finding cheap oil. But people on the other side are saying, wait a minute, we're getting out of oil.
386 billion in the first half of the year is about what the run rate is annually, of at least order of magnitude, well within the order of magnitude, what we've been spending here lately annually on upstream CapEx.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point, Mark. And if you look at, I started Surge in 2010 thinking, hey, let's see if energy tech investing works. Let's try renewables. Let's just investigate. But what happened? I shut it down because there's no way we can really make money here. And then all these energy funds came in behind me and raised significant capital to put money behind it. And what's happening to those funds? These are all partners that have raised significant capital, their own money in, and these are 10 plus year funds. They can't just quit. Well, they can, but they're not going to because it's their careers. And so they're going to double, triple down and look at the performance of these funds. They're terrible. So this is what I think we all need to wake up. But there is a reality that some things are just too big to fail. And if you talk to most of people and people listen to our podcast, it's going to be hard for them to be like, wait a minute, wow, a bunch of smart people are being really stupid. It's too big. I must be missing something. But the reality is you're not missing anything. They're making really stupid decisions. Now, we all would love to see the world, actually not all of us, but let's just say the world goes renewable. Well, guess what? We're watching it in real time. Everyone's prices and cost of living are going through the roof. So, except, guess who's playing 4D chess? China. What's China doing? As you said, Mark, how many coal plants have they built last year alone?
95 gigawatts.
And what's that equivalent size of?
Texas peak demand was 86.
So why is the Chinese using dirty coal? And what's the cost of this power? It's cheap.
Yeah, cheap.
8, 9 cents, 10 cents.
If that.
Nothing, right?
Yeah. And that's the 4D chess that you referred to, is we're going to continue, and the spending on renewables is certainly very heavily China weighted because they're the almost monopolistic supplier of a lot of the value chain of renewables. And so, as Kyle Bass tweeted out today in one of his many diatribes on China, is that they're playing a game, a supportive game to help continue to fuel a destabilization of energy security for countries in the West that have gone headlong, very generation heavy into renewables. And we've talked ad nauseum about all the system level problems related to grid reliability and transmission infrastructure, et cetera. But the fact that China built enough coal last year to power Texas peak demand and then some is pretty stunning.
I love this quote by Frederick Hayek in The Constitution of Liberty. He says, quote, to act on the belief that we possess the knowledge and power which enable us to shape the processes of society entirely to our liking, knowledge which in fact we do not possess, is likely to make us do much harm. Renewables funding without market discipline is a recipe for waste. We've seen it. And what's interesting about the $365 billion invested, it's these are people trying to push a narrative, and they haven't stopped and taken a step back saying, wait a minute, is this really smart? I think it's really interesting. You're going to see a lot of failure. A lot of failure is continuing to happen, and we've seen it. Now, debate me. Prove me wrong.
No, I think it's really important too. Could you sit there and go, well, why can this happen? Well, it can happen because the people that pay the price for this are poor people in the continent of Africa. You know, let's just be real about this. If we're going to shut down hydrocarbons and not provide energy resources to the cheapest and best energy resources to the rest of the planet, I mean, those are the people that pay the price, and they don't have a strong voice. I mean, let's be real. If rich politicians in DC paid a price for high energy prices, for erratic energy service, you might get something done about it. But so long as it's the poor people, nobody cares.
I mean, it's really expensive to live on Nantucket. Let's make it personal for a second. We have offshore wind. That price increased our cost of living. But we have a lot of, because it's a sanctuary state, so we've imported a bunch of illegal immigrants here to the island who can't afford to live here. So the island has decided, let's increase the taxes on wealthier people and let's subsidize the poor people and what they're paying. So in many cases, not in Africa, because no one cares about the poor people in Africa. I don't care who you are. Now, we might personally be like, man, that's sad, but no one really cares, because if they cared, they'd do something about it in a major way, and they don't. So let's just get that off the table. And if you're a listener and you care, come prove to me you care. If you started a nonprofit, great. If it's a business decision, then you're a smart business person. But the government is subsidizing and hiding the true cost of this energy, and it's these bad policies that are being passed on. And in some cases, most people don't really know. It's the same issue that we have with the fact that your property taxes are rolled into your mortgage for most people, so they don't really know how much property taxes really are. Or health insurance, they don't really know because they work for a company that pays half, and then their health insurance cost is being pulled out of their paycheck, so they don't really know the cost. So I think that's part of the issue, is most of us really do not understand the cost of delivering and using energy. So with that being said, how do we even know? And part of our job at Collide is to inform them. I wish we had more people that weren't experts, but that really did want to learn, because that's part of the issue, is most people just don't know. So they say electric cars bad, or ICE cars bad. Or in Martha's Vineyard yesterday, I saw a Tesla that said, my car was cool until Elon fucked it up.
Or I bought this before Elon went crazy.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, and
although when he went anti-Trump, did that cause him to come back? Where are we on that spectrum? I can't keep up with it.
I don't know, Chuck. I've never been to Martha's Vineyard, and Holly was like, I want you to go. So we went on a little couple day trip, and it was a lot dirtier than Nantucket, by the way. I'm just saying it. It's dirty.
All right.
And there's a lot of businesses that are like, businesses closed. I don't know, the island doesn't seem to be doing great. But the best thing about it, I got so giddy, is to see Chappaquiddick and that bridge that Ted Kennedy drove off and killed Mary Jo. and didn't even report it. I mean, that was the highlight, is seeing that in Chappaquiddick you can kill people and get away with it. So I shouldn't make light of her death. That is a tragedy.
We really shouldn't. By all accounts, she was a very good person, and quite frankly, even if she wasn't, no one deserves that. But
not at all. I'm being kind of in jest, but that was the coolest part of Martha's Vineyard, Chappaquiddick.
Let's get back to a little bit under the umbrella or inside the tent of renewables. So the corporate push is not, again, if you zoom out on a global basis, you still have about 70% by revenue of the top 2,000 companies globally that are still very progressively and aggressively pushing a net zero agenda, which, is going to drive incentives for stacking more on top of, I would say less than a reliable and a fragile system right now. My only, looking back on it, a rational person would say we need to look at the entire integrated system and figure out beyond generation what our pinch points are, what needs to happen with transmission, what needs to happen with distribution, substations, interconnects, and all those things are manifesting now in some of the problems that we're seeing. And when you layer in a massive amount in the US and probably globally too of big chunky power demand from AI data centers on top of that, it just feels like there's some collisions coming, yet we continue to extol the virtues of stacking tens of billions, hundreds of billions, mostly on the generation side, where, in the case of China or Texas or in other places, that's not the problem. But has anyone seen any kind of comprehensive policy pronouncements on what are we going to do about what makes the system work reliably? And that is the infrastructure, the grid, the transmission, the distribution.
Yeah,
I did see Frac
brilliant.
right before we got started. Frac put out a post that said, I'm interested in building a company that builds transformers. Who's with me?
Yeah, their backlog is tremendous. I think that's actually the brilliant point, Mark, is that, and that's a knock maybe against kind of the market, if there's any knock. And the knock is most companies think short term and are about what can I do today to make money. We're talking about an energy system that's super complex and super long term. But at the same time, you can point to, hey, during the shale revolution in Pennsylvania, people built new refineries to make plastics based off this cheap byproduct. So I think people will make long-term decisions if it's in their economic incentive. The biggest challenge is the infrastructure in this country, at least, is sort of a government thing to do. And the government has to be, is part of sort of organizing this massive energy system, like ERCOT, in Texas, for example, which is a super interesting challenge and very difficult problem to solve.
I do like the New Hampshire solution that I circulated. Yeah, exactly. I was when I was having coffee at Joseph's with the old guys. They get the Wall Street Journal every day, so I had to go old school and take a picture of it instead of finding the digital copy, and that's what I sent around to y'all. But House Bill 672 basically says, so long as you're not connecting to the grid, anybody can kind of build whatever generation they want in New Hampshire, and God bless them, So I think we're going to see more and more off-grid solutions happen because of all the things you just said, Mark. It's congested freeway out there.
Yeah, and yet most of the proposed or in motion data center projects, we talked about Texas a couple of weeks ago. I think there was the top 10 that RBN covered. 9 out of those 10 were grid dependent.
Well, the nuance there is they're connecting to the grid, and ERCOT is unique in that the connection to the grid in ERCOT is you can connect anywhere you want to. We can shut you down whenever we want to. Other FERC grids within the United States, you have to do a study, you have to get approved. There are plans on how they shut down things over time. ERCOT's like, yeah, you can pop on, dude, but if we don't need you. So it makes sense to me that every project you build connects to the grid in Texas because, you just as soon sell some power when you have a shot to sell some power.
That's a fairly recent, the kill switch legislation, which is what I think you're referring to, Senate bill. I forget the number.
That was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, and
it was
so
the response to Uri.
And you're trying to concentrate. You're trying to concentrate the load sheds when you get into, I think, a period a la Uri or something farther back than that, which I think the frequency of those things is pretty low over decade type periods, but when they do happen, they can be quite dislocating and damaging. And to have ERCOT come within 4 minutes and 27 seconds of a total collapse would have been catastrophic, not only for Texas, but also for the rest of the country. So last thing on renewables and somewhat related, I was happy to see that the Trump administration reversed something we talked about last year, which was the Biden administration's one of their last moves. The Department of the Interior had issued a no action on the Ambler mining road. You guys remember that? I mean, Ambler's been in discussion and on pause for the better part of 20 years. You got copper and zinc and other things up there in the northwest of Alaska. And so what Trump did was essentially via executive order or something akin to that, reversed that no action and essentially approved the Ambler Road, which is critically dependent upon it's 211 miles long. I forget what was going through the national forest, but apparently that's back on it. It led me to get in my own rant with myself about, okay, we're seeing a lot of quick action in the form of executive action, but what's Congress doing to codify and legislate so that when the pendulum swings back the other way, maybe it's not in 28, maybe it's in 32, kind of here we go again. It's just a constant back and forth through the executive action channel as opposed to making durable legislation.
Yeah, I think DC's a joke these days. I mean, they can't even agree on a continuing resolution for 7 weeks. And so I think if the Trump administration came out for any of this stuff, there's no way you're getting Democrat votes for it. Maybe 3 or 4 at the most. And so Ann Bradbury, when she came on the podcast, Chuck Job, probably about a year ago, it was post-Trump election, but I don't think he had taken office yet. She swore there was kind of bipartisan efforts to do things like permitting, et cetera, and we just haven't seen it, and I don't think we're going to see it. I think until Trump goes away, the Democrats just can't bring themselves to support something, even if it, saved the world.
Yeah, Joe Manchin left a term too early. We could use him with that Energy Permitting Reform Act or some framework like that. So
are we going old school and we have a finger of the week?
Yeah, it's kind of a review thing and maybe a bit of a victory lap.
We'll spike the freaking football, Mark.
So, the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which is a sub-alliance of GFANZ, which is the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, has said we're going to cease operations as a member-oriented group. We will now operate under the framework of guidelines. And this was quickly on the heels. I think this announcement came out last week. This was quickly on the heels of the mass exodus by several months ago of names like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citi, et cetera. This is something, as you guys all know, came out of the euphoria for some of 2019, 2020, where it was born out of the COP that was in Glasgow. I've always thought of it as a bit of a dangerous frontier for U.S. listed companies and banks in particular, where there was arguably, at least the tone of the messaging was what I believe to be something worth looking into, which is restraint of trade and not financing certain types of otherwise legitimate companies and projects defined as oil and gas and coal. And that was the read between the lines message of both of these groups. So Congress had some hearings a few months ago. Jim Jordan, there was a lot of inflammatory language. I think he called them climate cartels. But my issue is none of this has been subjected to any kind of forensic discovery, as it would be in litigation. And to suggest, and I'm probably a little bit guilty of thinking back to how the FTC treated Scott Sheffield and Pioneer, yet you've got this industry group that is explicitly and implicitly saying, we're going to pull back on, or we're not going to do business with, potentially not do business with, a certain otherwise legitimate segment of our borrower base, our financing clients. And so anyway, good riddance to...
That was the politest and nicest fuck you I've seen, Mark.
I think I have yet to swear.
I think you're probably right.
4 years and counting.
You know what my favorite part of Monday Night Football was back in the day with Don Meredith, when he'd get drunk, turn out the lights, the party's over. We can just sing that to him.
Oh, yeah. You think he was drunk in the booth?
I hope so.
Well, the safest road to hell is the gradual one. So thank goodness they're getting off that bandwagon.
Well, and this thing potentially could have had real teeth to it. And I would argue that, there's probably some measurable increase in the cost of capital for oil and gas providers over the period of this,
for sure,
questionable behavior that ultimately translates to harm to the American consumer of their products, right? Not the banks, but those that have a higher cost of capital because you've got some virtuous risk premium or risk framework related to climate net zero. And I got to believe part of it was, Larry Fink certainly backed off on his lecturing of CEOs early in this wave of energy transition rhetoric. But I got to believe part of it is people are looking around and saying, and maybe the two weren't connected. But if you had an FTC that was so motivated, I wouldn't see why this might not be something worth looking into. But I think it's gone away.
So two things. Number one, I have to admit when I was wrong. I actually made a prediction on Chuck Job at some point in the last 4 years that at least one, if not two, of the large money center banks would completely divest of hydrocarbon lending and all associated forms with it. So thank goodness I was wrong. Good guess, about that. I was kind of feeling it. And then the second thing, and I don't know that I told you guys this, so I made an executive decision, but it was really cool stuff. I went out to ProFrac Day. They were demoing a lot of their equipment, a lot of their systems out in the field. I went and I was able to sit down with Matt Wilkes of ProFrac and Panos Adam Mopoulos, who
I know
I'm
Pano.
butchering his name.
I've known him for 10 years.
And I apologize for butchering his name, but I sat down with, he's with Seismos, and I sat down and talked about their joint venture they've done together, real-time data on fracs so that decisions can be made in real time. I mean, I fracked a lot of wells where you got your report 2 days later and you said, okay, we'll adjust this on the next frac. We're actually, the industry is able to do that in real time. Then also followed up with Larry and Steve from their shops to talk more about it. So we pushed that out on BDE and Chuck Job today. So those are great interviews
That's awesome
to see. Good to see you, boys.
Good to see you. Hope
I love it, Chuck.
Stay away from that nostril. Stay away from that nostril.
Exactly. All
I
right,
guys. Thanks for sharing that.
If you like what you heard today, subscribe and forward us on to
Share.
somebody that you care about.
Exactly. Somebody you want to see warm in the winter.
And buy some Collide Enterprise.
There you go. Please do.
It'll make your life so much better.
See you guys.